Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Mohammed Ali, Adam White, and Jeremy Smith. Just like Ligue 1, we are having our own award show a week early because why wait to get all dolled up? But will our selections be as controversial as the UNFP Awards last night? Find out after a topsy-turvy Ligue 1 weekend again and a look ahead at the Europa League final. But first, here's the news. Marseille kicked things off on Friday night with the Europa League final firmly in their minds, but slipped up in the race for Champions League qualification through the league. Guingamp had Clement Grenier score twice in a 3-all draw that leaves Rudy Garcia's side, their Ligue 1 finish at least, out of their hands. On an enthralling 9-game Saturday, Strasbourg secured their Ligue 1 status in dramatic fashion. The Alsace side came from 2-1 behind against a Lyon side on a 7-game win streak to win 3-2, with club stalwart Dimitri Liénard scoring the winner with the last kick of the game. That defeat for Bruno Genesio's side has allowed Monaco to practically secure Champions League football and steal second from under their noses. Fabinho's late winner from the spot means that unless both teams below them win and there be a 5-goal swing between them and Marseille, the Monegasque will be back in Europeans' premier competition next season. Lille also saved themselves this weekend with their third win in a row, going over 2-1 at home to Dijon. That was ensured as Toulouse fell to defeat again as they were thumped 4-2 by Bordeaux, meaning Lille need a win and hope other results go their way to try and avoid the relegation playoff at a minimum. The only other side they can catch is Caen, who dropped to 17th after a 4-1 loss to Nice. Mario Balotelli seemed to signal his last home game for the Southern club, high-fiving the entire stadium and stating that they were all going a party that evening. Troyes gave themselves a glimmer of hope in their battle to avoid automatic relegation with a 1-1 draw against Montpellier, who now will likely miss out on European football. Elsewhere, Rennes secured that Europa League spot as they beat champions Paris Saint-Germain 2-0. The Parisians lost their first home game in 42 attempts as they said farewell to Thiago Motta in true Thiago Motta fashion, with him giving away the penalty for Rennes' opener. Nantes snapped their 7-game winless run with a 2-0 win over Angers, while Amiens notched another win by this game scoreline against already relegated Metz. Off the pitch, last night was the UNFP Awards, with Neymar picking up the award for Player of the Year. Best goalkeeper went to Stefan Donde for the 5th time. Kylian Mbappe matched Eden Hazard by winning his second Young Player of the Year gong. Coach of the Year was gifted to Unai Emery. Goal of the season was won by a Malcolm strike against Dijon back in September, while the full 11 consisted of Mandanda, Dani Alves, Marquinhos, Thiago Silva, Ferland Mendy, Luis Gustavo, Marco Verratti, Nabil Fekir, Kylian Mbappe, Edinson Cavani, and Neymar. In managerial news as well, it has been officially confirmed that Thomas Tuchel is the new head at Paris Saint-Germain. The German has signed a 4-year deal and will take over in the summer. And that's all for now, but for all your latest in the new world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. There's a lot to get through tonight, to be fair, but we're going to start with a look ahead to Wednesday night's game when it's a big one as Marseille head to Lyon to take on Atletico Madrid in the Europa League final. It's a chance for Marseille, should they end up where they're currently sat in 4th, and that, unless other results go their way, will be likely where they're finishing. That will be outside of the Champions League places. Mo, this is their chance not only to win silverware, but to have 4 French teams, if they do finish 4th, in the Champions League next season. But how important is it not just for them to win silverware, but also to secure an automatic Champions League place, which would exponentially move ahead their championship project?
Yeah, I mean it's a very very important game for the project. It's a very important game for the club. I had the pleasure of speaking to Jacques Henry just a couple of weeks ago, and he said that nobody had been planning actually for the Champions League well, certainly this year. Um, but obviously qualifying and getting to where they are at the moment means that things have already progressed at such a pace that playing a final and having this chance, it's one that's too good to miss. But Marseille are not favourites, so certainly I think even at this stage for me, it looks perhaps like a little easier to qualify for the Champions League by at least securing third in Ligue 1 next Saturday.
And that's where the stickler on this one really lies now, Adam, is that they slipped up at the weekend against Guingamp. In fact, they were pretty lucky to get away with a draw in the end. I mean, they went a man down, obviously, when Sten van Donde got sent off and they went 3-2 down. They scored another excellent goal through Tovan, but a clearance off the line by Jovan and Amavi in the last couple of minutes really saved their skin. But at the same time, they now can't really catch Monaco unless there was a big swing in goals. Their real hope is that Lyon have to go to Nice and at least get a victory as a minimum, really, to guarantee it. That really puts the feelers onto this game on Wednesday, because this obviously comes first, and they know that if they lose this one, and say if it takes the energy out of them, they've got all the travelling, they've got all the build up to a final, a European final, and then they have to pick themselves back up again if they were to lose. So it just makes this game even bigger than it already was.
Yeah, it somehow managed to accentuate the importance of the Europa League final, given the stage that Marseille are at in their development and this the project. It couldn't get much bigger, to be honest. And what Mo was saying about they weren't necessarily playing for Champions League this season, getting there would be still a huge deal for them and a big step in their progression. So yeah, it only adds to the weight of the importance of the occasion. The game with Guingamp itself was an absolutely brilliant game as well. It was end to end and eventful and goals, and yeah, it was superb. And they were obviously unlucky to not win in the end. To be honest, it was a very exciting match. But looking ahead to the final, it's difficult to understate how important a game it is for Marseille. And if they come into the final day having lost, and the gap to make up so big anyway, even if they were to finish level on points with Monaco and goal difference, the head to head would then come into play, which means Monaco would still finish above them, having beaten them 6-1 this season. So it's a tall order to finish in the top three, but hopefully they win the Europa League and finish fourth, and we get 4 French teams in the Champions League next season.
That's the light at the end of the tunnel, at least, if Marseille do win on Thursday. And let's focus back on that game, really, Jez. They facing a very, very tough side, the side that no one really wanted in the Europa League this season, in Atletico Madrid. As soon as they dropped out of the Champions League into that third spot, everyone thought that this was the team to avoid. And thankfully, they've avoided them up until this point. But you always have to, to earn any kind of trophy, you tend to have to beat the best teams. And this is going to be a very tough side against a motivated Madrid side. They'll want to always win an extra slice of trophies. They're always important at the end of a player's career. And also, added to that is the likes of Antoine Griezmann, who's yet to win something with Madrid at his hometown ground, as it was at Lyon at Parc OL. All the narrative seems to be pointing towards Atletico Madrid.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of narratives there. Like, I think Lucas Hernandez was born in Marseille, so he said that he considers Marseille his home city. So that's like another little subplot there. But I think all season Atletico have looked the team to beat. They've sort of taken it not more seriously than everyone else, but of some of the other bigger clubs that you'd have expected to maybe really make a play for it. Teams like Dortmund, I guess, they've all sort of fallen by the wayside, and Atletico have looked the team to beat the whole time. But in a final, maybe over 2 legs, it would be the favourite team is always going to be a bit more of a favourite to sort of come out on top over 2 legs. In a final, anything can happen, and there has been such a groundswell of support behind Marseille. And even though it's in Lyon, which has sort of become a hostile city, I guess, in recent years for Marseille, I think the fact that it is in France is not a huge advantage, but a bit of a leveler for Marseille. I do think they'll have more support there than Atletico, and just sort of home comforts, being not having to travel so far, being more familiar with the stadium. All these things I think could help Marseille. Then it's just a case of obviously what happens on the pitch and sort of matchups. I think a lot depends on fitness as well, but really Gustavo, Thauvin, Payet, they're the players that have made Marseille tick all season. And in terms of Marseille going forward, they're clearly going to be the crucial players. At the same time, they have to be solid in defence, because it's hard to see Atletico not scoring. And certainly Marseille, for neutrals anyway, but certainly from a Marseille point of view, they have to score first, I think, because Atletico are so good at protecting a lead and generally so difficult to break down that if they go 1-0 up sort of early on, that's their ideal situation.
Mo, a sort of two-part question really ahead of this game, and it focuses on both the team itself and one player in particular. In terms of they're playing an Atletico Madrid side who are famous for their defensive instincts and being, like Jez said, if they get ahead, protecting a lead. That's almost the antithesis of what Marseille wanted to face, really, at least anyway, with the defence being a little bit better this season, but still a little bit suspect in the bigger games, especially. Do Marseille really need to go for this one and really go out with the blocks and attack in this game? And conscious to that as well. Sorry, Mo. Just conscious to that as well. In particular, someone who, for argument's sake, for some people they've mentioned, hasn't really turned up in the bigger games, but has been terrific all season. In particular, Florian Thauvin taking that mantle and showing himself in this final as well as that forefront of that attacking mentality.
Yeah, I know. I think they've got no choice. Like Joe said, I agree. Marseille's best chance of winning the final Wednesday would be to go for it, and largely, the only reason that I can potentially see winning the final will be because Atletico have had an off day. Because just the way that they're set up, it's sort of unlikely to see, how OM can stifle, will break down on Atletico side who have done it against much more proficient teams across the season. They did it perfectly, as you saw, against Arsenal in the second leg of the Europa League. So, to answer your first question, yeah, it's a final, there's a second chance to qualify for the Champions League. So personally, I'd like to see a bit more caution to the wind, sort of, let's go for it. Let's attack. Let's see where we can end up and sort of judge the game accordingly as it progresses, rather than playing it safe, getting to 45 minutes at, goalless, and then trying to sneak a goal because, I don't have a lot of confidence in just the side that we're going to put out against, man for man, how we're going to break down this Atletico team. And yeah, to answer your second question, yeah, it all depends on, and like Jess said before, like the key players, Thauvin, Payet, especially in attack, ticking. Thauvin, yes, I think, there's a case to say that he hasn't performed when there are players of a certain level against him. So, this is a big occasion, and this is one that you sort of don't want to miss up because it's been 14 years since the club got to a European final. For many of the players, it's the first time in their career. It's easy to go missing, in a away fixture against Lyon or something, but those come to a penny. It's a final the world will be watching. Didier Deschamps, of course, certainly will be watching as well. So, and I think that a negative game won't suit him either. So it's a good chance for both a player and both a starting 11 to be more expressive, to be more entrepreneurial going forward, and just see where we can end up. As at the end of the day, if there's obviously no shame in losing that final, and there's another chance on Saturday. So all the best, I guess.
Yeah, it's going to be a massive game with a lot of eyes on it, Adam, and the positive thing for Marseille as well is some other players coming into form recently as well, especially Dimitri Payet really finding his feet in the last sort of 2 months to add to Tovan and bits like that. But then at the same time, Mitroglou seemed to find a bit of form, but has got injured as well. It looks like he'd be facing a real test to be fit for the final. It looks like he's probably going to miss out. You also look at the performances of Luis Gustavo, who's been excellent all season in front of that defence as well. They all need to play at their very best level against a team like this to even stand a chance of victory.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They do. Although Atletico Madrid have been fantastic in recent seasons, and obviously have that kind of streetwise, dogged, hard to break down, aura around them. Perhaps, although they finished second this season, that's kind of in Spain. That's sort of they should. That's sort of there's a caveat to that in the Real Madrid have been pretty poor in the league, and some of their players aren't necessarily at the peak of their form. Koke's not had the best season. Neither Sual Niguez and Griezmann's not quite as omnipotent as he was at one point. And I don't know that the gap is as big as perhaps we're worried that it is, because I imagine everybody on this podcast would be supporting Marseille, or from a French football's perspective, and I don't know that the gap is quite so large. So I'm sort of with Mo in that I'd like to see Marseille be proactive and play to their strengths. And you're right, their strengths are Dimitri Payet's form. Florent Thauvin had a superb season, obviously, and although I agree with the fact that he's been a little quiet in big games, given his form in general, you still back him to have some sort of an impact on this fixture, nevertheless. So they need to give Payet and Thauvin the opportunity to perform, and if they do defend, and maybe Garcia goes, he was talking about going with sort of three centre backs. I don't know how much that might change a team. Depends if Sacco plays on the right of a three, or if Gustavo just drops in there, which wouldn't be too dissimilar, I suppose, in terms of outlook. But it's still a defensive move, and if he does go with that defensive move, it doesn't play to their strengths at all, and he risks getting sort of suffocated by Atletico Madrid and having less of the ball and not being able to sort of play out and put pressure on them. So I'm 100% with Mo in that they should be proactive. But there are some sort of options, sort of more auxiliary options, perhaps players that have come into form at the right time. I think Lopez has started to come back. Maxime Lopez has started to come back into the form that he showed sort of towards the end of last season. Morgan Sanson has had some sort of standout games recently, although he's been a bit up and down. So there are other options for Marseille to inflict damage on Atletico, but I think they need to play to their attacking strengths, and it'd be interesting to see how Garcia does go about setting up this game.
It's going to be a really interesting game on Wednesday night. So let's get some predictions, and I'll start with you, Jez. What do you think the score will be?
Head says 2-1 Atletico, but I'll go with heart and say 2-1 Marseille.
I'll allow you to do both head and heart as well yourself, Mo. What do you think?
I mean, I think Marseille won't get thrashed. Definitely. Head says 1 or 2-0 to Atletico, but heart says that Marseille pull it out of the bag and win by a goal to 0.
Adam?
I'm optimistic. I think it'll go to extra time, but maybe 2-1 Marseille in extra time. Also optimistic, though.
I think I'm going to probably be the harshest out of all of us. I'm a big fan of Atletico Madrid, and I have been for a while. I just feel like that kind of team is the antithesis of what Marseille really want to face at this stage of any competition, really. I just fancy maybe a goal in the first 20 minutes from Atletico, and they just seem to hold it out with that experience and that know-how and that nous. It's just maybe a sneaky 1-0 win for Diego Simeone's side, which would be unfortunate. I'm sure we're all backing Marseille, because even if they finish fourth, what a terrific thing it is for Ligue to have 4 potential Champions League players. And that's the interesting twist that sort of happened this weekend, with results going a little bit crazy between those top 3 at the beginning of Saturday evening. Obviously, Marseille had already drawn, and we'll talk about that one in a moment. But Lyon ended up losing in the final couple of minutes to Strasbourg, who we'll come on to very later as well, who are absolutely safe now. And Monaco had to play out until the final minutes as well. They had a little couple of difficult moments with Saint-Etienne, but came out with a win that practically guarantees Champions League football for themselves. But let's start with Marseille's game. Mo, it's a tough ask for them, really. I know they played on Friday instead of everyone else on Saturday to help them with the preparation for the Europa League in midweek, and planning that and making sure you're still fighting on two fronts can be a difficult thing at this time of the year within the size of squad Marseille have, especially in forward areas. But this was not the kind of game they really wanted to face, a Guingamp side that have shown that they've beaten Monaco in recent weeks. They drew with Paris Saint-Germain a couple of weeks ago as well. They're always a dogged side, and they've got Clement Grenier and Jimmy Briand playing really well at the moment. They're starting to look like the side that we've seen under Kwambare in a couple of years, despite having a bit of a dip in the middle of this season. But a tough game, but at the same time, with Mandondo being sent off late, it's pretty good that they even got a point out of this one.
I mean, yeah, no, there's certainly mixed feelings about this one. I kind of already felt that this game would sort of seal it in terms of, Marseille not qualifying if they didn't, because I think Guingamp away they just got a sort of a bogey side about them like every time they go there, and they've started the season there in the last 2-3 years, and they've suffered defeats every single time. There's, I think, only one win away there since Guingamp have been back in Ligue 1. So I kind of already imagined that, especially just before the Europa League final, that it would be essentially too much. And obviously, when you look on paper, so many players were missing or suspended. So many of the key players like Rami Renaldo and Gustavo, the key defensive pillars, that it would be a tough ask. Essentially, I didn't expect a victory. But to go up 2-0 in as they did, was it inside the first 20 minutes or something, and not see out from there, I think that was a bit inexcusable. At the end of the day, if it was just a sort of a board draw, or OM had hit back, then I think there'll be less disappointment with how it's turned out. But to lose a lot, like essentially to lose the lead and then lose Mandanda. And credit to Garcia and credit to the teams that they never seem to die. Essentially, the whole season, they've come back from losing positions very, very often, which has happened so rarely in the last couple of years. That it's happened again on Friday, scoring late on, ending the game 9 against 11. Yes, I think from that point, a point is obviously better than nothing. But it really does feel like a missed opportunity when you're just before half-time, 2-0 up, and then conceding 2 silly penalties, one of which was very silly, the Campos handball, but I guess he couldn't have done much about it. It's a bit galling.
Yeah, and Adam, I know you obviously had eyes on this game, but at the same time, when it did go to 3-2 to Guingamp and they went ahead, there was still 20 minutes left, but at the same time, you must have felt as a Guingamp fan, or a Lyon or Monaco fan at least anyway, that they really should have seen it out. But at the same time, Marseille and that man Thauvin have done it again and pulled it out of the bag. It's a disappointment maybe that, like Mo said, that they started so well and got themselves in such a strong position, but at the same time, they still saved themselves.
They did, and there's credit to be had there in the fact they did save themselves, and there's also, although I'm on board with Mo again in that it was, I can understand why as a Marseille fan it would be galling to lose out for having been 2-0 up, but there is an element of a huge element of fortune in one of the penalties at least. Obviously Mandonda's one is a pretty blatant one, but the handball is pretty lucky, and it sort of spiraled out of control a little bit for Marseille, and it's unfortunate. But given that they've got now 3 points gap, and it's sort of disintegrated, hasn't it? It feels like while it was disappointing, a disappointing result, it feels like that it's the kind of game that they shouldn't be losing. And although Guingamp, 3-2 up, and it was, the crowd got behind them, and it felt like a bit of a sort of a tidal wave that at one point, especially when Briand scored his penalty, that Marseille still deserve credit to come back into the game, and both sides might end up being disappointed, to be honest. But they're still in with a chance, Marseille, of coming third at least. So it's not disastrous, but slightly disappointing on both sides, to be honest. But I don't think Marseille fans should be too disappointed given the way it panned out.
Yeah, because on paper it's disappointing that they look like they're at least the favourites at the moment to miss out. But at the same time, Jez, no one really expected them to be even challenging for Champions League football this season. And credit to them, even if they ignoring the Europa League final really and just focusing on Ligue 1 matters, that their final game is against Amiens, who have had a terrific season but must be slowing down now, although they got another terrific win at the weekend at least. But it's another chance for them at least, with Lyon having to face Nice, which is not the easiest game to finish on at all. There's still that glimmer of hope that if Marseille do the professional job they can against a team like Amiens, that they can even still finish in third.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the 3 matches, or the matches that the 3 teams have got left on paper, sort of ignoring what may or may not happen on Wednesday, on paper, I think Marseille have got the easiest match, and that's not showing any disrespect to Amiens, who've obviously been amazing this season. But they've got safety secured, they've got nothing to play for. Troyes and Nice both do. And Nice, obviously, we know are a very classy team, and not so good away from home, but on their day, are capable of sort of matching any other team, even giving PSG a good game. And Troyes are also still fighting for, the very least to get that playoff place rather than automatic relegation, and they've shown reasonable signs of life recently. So I think that. I mean, you can see Marseille sort of winning. I don't know, possible they could win 5-0, Monaco go down 1-0, and there could be a sort of surprise change there. But it looks like probably Monaco will be okay, and it will be between Lyon and Marseille. But as Lyon showed the other day, classic Lyon, 2-1 up in the 89th minute, they should have been home and hosed, and they didn't even draw. They lost the match, granted to a fantastic free kick, but that's what this Genesio's Lyon team are capable of. So it's certainly not, although they'd start as favourites at home, it's certainly not a formality that they'll beat Nice. So, even if Marseille don't secure a Champions League spot on Wednesday, I don't think it's entirely out of the question that they could still make it at the weekend. I wouldn't necessarily put money on it. I think that they clearly start as the favourites to finish fourth, but I think there could still be a couple of sort of swings one way and the other during the final matches.
It's good to have some last day intrigue, but possibly at least the weakest amount of intrigue out of those top 3 now is Monaco, who came out with a massive win again. They've sort of sneaked across the line almost, really. They were excellent sort of in the mid part of the season, Mo, where they went on that excellent run really from from the winter break, obviously. Well, just before that in December, they had that loss against Nantes back in November, and that after that they didn't lose again in Ligue 1 until they faced Paris Saint-Germain again, really. It was an excellent run, but they sort of stumbled after that. Another loss to Guingamp, a draw to Amiens, allowed other teams to sneak in. They got a little bit lucky the previous week against Caen to take that 2-1 victory with Silla grabbing his first ever double, and then they managed to nick that win in the last couple of minutes against Saint-Etienne, although some Monaco fans will argue that Jemison's header was over the line, and where's goal line technology when you need it, although it is changing next summer, thank goodness. But they look like they've just about creeped over the line now.
Yeah, I mean, like you both said that they are the favourites to secure Champions League. It's going to take like a sort of a ridiculous goal swing, well, not an unexpected one at least, for them to drop out essentially at this stage. But I personally, for one, feel like they've been extremely lucky in the last couple of weeks. Their form has been arguably the worst out of the 3 clubs vying for Champions League. I watched their game against and Caen. I thought they were very poor, and sort of the key players, Lemar, one of them, were just have been pretty off for a while. I don't know what's gone on in the club, but just something is missing. Something does not take. I don't know if the players are sort of their minds are elsewhere, or whether it's just fatigue, or whatever it is. It's that they've scored 6 points in the last week or so through being extremely lucky. Like 90 minutes at the weekend against Saint-Etienne, the goal very late on, and then young Silla popping up against Caen, where like if they take if they'd only taken 2 points in that game, then this would be a very, very different situation. So they do face obviously a Troyes side that needs needs victory, and they're going to be playing at home as well in their final game. But the 3-point gap and the 6-point goal, or I think 6-goal difference at the very least against OM, means that it's going to be pretty unlikely.
Yeah, Adam.
But they are going to finish second probably, and I don't know whether it's to say whether it's deserved.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it, Adam? I mean, they've sort of slowly but surely sort of rolled themselves over the line after stumbling just before the final hurdle, really. After that terrific run, and then that thumping from Paris Saint-Germain just really put the cogs into place, and players seemed to be already on the beach. It looked like they were the ones that were possibly going to slip up, and Jardim's season sort of crumbling before his eyes, but they've just about managed to maintain it, which will keep some of these players happily in the transfer window for them at least, and Jardim's reputation intact with Monaco, looking like they're going to get another season of Champions League football at a minimum.
Yeah, it does look that way. I mean, I didn't think I'd say this at the start of the season, but given the form that Stevan Jovetic found himself in, his injury has been slightly prohibitive, and surprisingly so. And they actually missed him over the sort of the course of the sort of recent slump in form. But I think if they do finish second, and they look likely to, as you mentioned, I think Jardim definitely deserves a degree of credit for this year, given the overhaul they've had in their squad. The players that left in the summer and the additions that were made weren't exactly, equivalents to the players that left. And to finish second once more ahead of very strong Lyon and Marseille sides is a huge credit to his management once again. And although that 7-1 defeat at Paris Saint-Germain was well, it's difficult to describe how terrible it was and the fallout from that game, but it definitely deserves credit to finish second given the circumstances. And Jardim's reputation is a strong one, and a stronger one as a result, in my opinion, given the turnover and the way that for periods of the year Monaco were one of the best teams in the league, arguably the best team in the league for certain points, for certain periods of the season. So to mould a team after such upheaval is quite something. And whether he's there or not next season, Jardim is for me Ligue 1's best manager by some different distance, and he deserves credit once again this year. And he's managed to find a way to finish second once more, even though it's sort of a little bit fortunate. He's delivered, and it's difficult to deny that his coaching talents are going to be pretty highly sought after over the summer.
And that's where attention already seems to be swaying towards, Jez, is the things that Monaco do in the summer, because that's where there's a lot of interest, and they sort of ebb and flow. They have a down year and then an up year, but at the same time in the summer we're expecting Lamar to go, we're expecting Fabinho to go, maybe even Jardim himself might go. Where can this club go really next season? They're even linked to players like Samuel Grandsir, who's had a decent season at Troyes, but he's probably shown he's not quite ready for that kind of level of football, at least anyway. They've been linked with other young players across France, like Goury at Lyon as well. They're Goebbels, they're trying to attract away, but it feels like they're still in a little bit of a rebuild mode.
They're always in rebuild mode. It feels like the one season they weren't in rebuild mode was the season they won Ligue 1. And I agree with Adam. I think Jardim has proved that he's the best manager in Ligue 1 at the moment. And all the players who come and go, it's Jardim that's kept them going the last 3 or 4 years. And if he leaves this summer, which I think he will, allied to all the players leaving, then unless they come up with some absolute masterstroke of a replacement, I can't see them sort of challenging for the next couple of years, because I think what Jardim's done, the way he's been able to rebuild the squad year in, year out, and keep it competitive and more than competitive, qualifying for Champions League every year, going quite deep in the Champions League a couple of times. I think it's genuinely one of the most underrated achievements in Europe of the last few years.
Absolutely. They are linked to a couple of interesting managers, including Paulo Fonseca, who's done an excellent job at Shakhtar. It might be interesting if they could get someone of that kind of calibre, at least, to replace Jardim should he go in the summer. That's all for Mo, at least, this evening for the team. Thank you for joining us again, mate, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Yep, thanks.
We'll would move on to Lyon at this point, but I thought we would mix this in with the excellent relegation happenings really in this weekend, because now Lille and Strasbourg are officially safe, and starting with the latter of those two teams who've obviously played Lyon. Adam, it was a terrific game of football, really. It was Strasbourg all guns blazing in the first half, much like we've seen when they've played PSG at home, when they've played Marseille at home. They were terrific in that first half and held Lyon to no shots on target, really, which is incredible. And then immediately gave away a penalty in the second half, and a definite penalty against Fekir. They go 2-1 down with about 3 minutes to go of normal time. They grab an equaliser, and then who else but Dimitri Leonard to step up and score the goal in the final minute. The real stalwart, the player who's been at the club ever since they were still in the National, even for the longest time as well. It's one of those sort of fairy tale moments, but not winning after February, beating a side that's won 7 games in a row. You couldn't really picture Strasbourg doing that point, but they are going to be in Ligue next season.
Yeah, absolutely. You really couldn't picture it. And, as you said, they haven't won since the 11th of February, and that was against Troyes. So their only win, this calendar year since, well, they've beat Dijon as well, but it's really their only win up until this point. So it really is a bit of a turn up for the books for them to get this result. And we spoke a lot on the preview show about the fact that they seem to have timed this slump perfectly, and then they'd stay up, even though just because no one really wanted to catch them and overtake them. But it got to last weekend, and it felt like that perhaps the opposite was happening, in that they were just unable to avert the slide, and that they would, sort of inexorably slip towards relegation, given that Lille have suddenly started winning out of nowhere, and Toulouse might pick enough points to overhaul them as well. And the fact that they've managed to secure their league and status is huge. And although we talked about the fact that they were in National 2 years ago along with Amiens. It's a big jump, and it does get overlooked a little bit because they're a big club, and they've got such a vociferous fan base, and they've had some memorable results this season. You mentioned the home game with PSG, obviously the draw with Marseille. They, for the first sort of half of the season, they were a genuine threat at home. Obviously that tailed away in the second half of the year when they started to get injuries. Terrier's absence was a big one for them. Da Costa's absence over sort of March and April, again, their only real source of not necessarily goals, but possibly a focal point to the attack. Black and Bahoken aren't necessarily of the same level, in my opinion. And Kenny Lala, although he's only a fullback, has been very influential too. And so that they had a small squad, and the injuries and suspensions and started to add up in the classic kind of way. And it looked like it might be enough to see them down. So I think Thierry Loret deserves a huge amount of credit for keeping them in division, given their meteoric rise, as it were. And it's an underrated achievement, which has kind of been passed over by Amiens' superb season and perhaps some other big stories higher up the table. But I think Thierry Loret hasn't been mentioned in terms of manager of the season, and I'm not saying that he deserves it given the comparison with some, but he definitely deserves a lot of credit for maintaining their league and status.
Yeah, and a great chance for them now, like we've mentioned in the past, to build with a potential expansion of the stadium in the future, and they have a little bit maybe a bit of cash to play with, staying in Ligue, maybe some wise investments on increasing that playing squad, and maybe tapping into some of the things from Ligue 2 and bits like that, that maybe they can start building something that's a mainstay in Ligue 1. And it's a bit disappointing that Metz haven't stayed up as well, because they had two terrific derbies that we really enjoyed, Jez. But at the same time of Strasbourg staying up, which I'm sure you're not grinning too much about, at least anyway, but at the same time, for Lyon, they were 2-1 up for a long period of this game and looked like they were just about going to see it out. They were much better in the second half, and then in the end, they lose it. It's not really stopped their momentum completely. They still have a point advantage over Marseille, but it's a mighty tough game they have to face against Nice now to confirm Champions League football.
Yeah, I think the worry is that Lyon seem to sort of, that it feels like their forms, the form table is kind of very much in stages. It feels like they don't really have sort of odd wins and losses here and there. They sort of go on long winning runs, then long horrific runs, and then back to winning again. So there's kind of slight alarm bells that they threw that win away, and is that although there's only one match more, is that the start of one of their bad runs, which could be sort of terminal for them with that one match. But all or nothing match, you definitely want to be at home in their home stadium. And Nice, as good as they are, they're nowhere near the same team, I think, away from home. Balotelli generally hasn't performed anywhere near as well away. Again, there's interesting subplots there, because there's Player, who's obviously an ex-Lyon player, and I think he's confirmed that he's going to leave in the summer. So, he'll have quite a lot to prove to his former team, as well as wanting to leave his current team on a big high. So it's certainly not going to be straightforward for Lyon, and it's kind of typical of them that they've created the mess for themselves. So I'd still put the money on them, just because they've got so many potential match winners in their team. But it's never straightforward with them, and you never feel entirely comfortable. I mean, just as at the weekend, it felt like they'd done the hard bit, coming back from a goal down, quietening a raucous crowds, and then they stuff it up. You could see them sort of doing the opposite, going ahead early, I say the opposite, basically doing what they did at the end of the match, sort of going ahead early and then switching off, and Nice catching them at the end. So they really need to be switched on for the full 90 minutes. That includes Genesio, who I know a lot of Lyon fans feel that it's sort of coaching mistakes and really poor substitutions that have cost Lyon a few points this season. Everyone within the club has to be switched on for the full 90 minutes. Even if they've got the lead, they need to make sure that they protect it or they extend it, because a team managed by Lucien Favre, with possible European football at stake, is not going to just lie down and hand it to the opposition. And I think Lyon will probably do it, but well, I'm just repeating myself, but it wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world if they stuffed it up.
And that, like you say there, Jez, there's not only Alisson Player confirming he's leaving, Balotelli seemed like he's going to be leaving in the summer as well. You'd expect Jean-Michel Seri to be leaving as well. You think Lucien Favre might be heading on to Borussia Dortmund as an extra, another final sort of movement as well. Maybe Nice are all playing for trying to leave their club on a high as well, and that's going to make that even more difficult. But congratulations to Strasbourg, a terrific result for them to stay in Ligue 1 and maintain their status there, and hopefully grow as another club that can be a bit of a mainstay. And another congratulations is for Lille, because Adam, it felt like these three games that they were facing against Metz, against Dijon, and against Toulouse would obviously define their season, and they completely have, because three victories have ensured their safety. And it's credit to Galtier, it's credit to Motiba, who grabbed the double the weekend, and he's been very excellent in this last couple of months as well for them, and a massive result for them to stay up. And while it's not absolutely confirmed because of obviously the DNCG things we have to face possibly in the summer, but at least on the field they're safe.
They are. And although it doesn't feel like it in terms of points and momentum, it really does feel like it has the sort of the sensation of a great escape. Because although they weren't necessarily out of it in terms of situations I mentioned, the form has been utterly terrible, and there have been such turmoil this season. It's unbelievable, really, that one club could get into such a mess. And you look as well, you look even further back than even Lopez's reign, and you even look at Antonetti and Hervé Renard, and they're a club that have been in not far off crisis for several years now. Hervé Renard's reign was terrible, lasted. I think they lost to Troyes, and he got sacked the last time Troyes in the division, and Antonetti took over and somehow took them into top six, and then quickly his form with the club evaporated, and Passy kept them up following that, and then Bielsa came in, obviously, and another disaster. It just feels like they're sort of lurching from one catastrophe to the next, and it just felt like that was all culminating in their relegation. They won the league in 2011, and they were, for me, they were virtually favourites to go down, and somehow they've managed to pull this out. And you look at even beyond the wider sort of arc, if you like, of Lille's story, and you look at the turmoil in dressing room, and players like Amadou not turning up for sort of video review sessions with Gautier after games, and put players in nightclubs the night before that Marseille game in particular. Supposedly Luis Campos was in the dressing room calling his players idiots after that 5-1 defeat, and the pitch invasion where Nico Pepe was assaulted or he was attacked, and it's unbelievable. And the fact that they've won these 3 games in a row, they've been the perfect 3 games really for them to face to some extent. No offense to Jez, but Metz and Dijon and Toulouse aren't, especially Dijon away from home, aren't the 3 most frightening propositions in Ligue. But the fact that Lille have managed to win all 3 is somewhat of a miracle, and they're going to be in Ligue 1 again next season as it stands on the table at least. But I just as a final point, I really feel that the NCG situation is one that they should be very, very worried about. The financial authorities are particularly strict in France, and they love a relegation. They love automatically relegated teams and making them make up their finances in other ways. Troyes and Bastia have experienced it in recent years, and it would not surprise me in the slightest if they relegated Lille. So one battle's over, but I think another one may just be beginning, unfortunately.
Maybe hope for whoever finishes in the relegation playoff just yet. And just to quickly curtail sort of the relegation chat, it's pretty much between 3 teams now. Caen, who were on 37 points, they're practically safe, but not absolutely mathematically. I'm sure they'll still have some fingernails jaggling if some results start going against them, because they do have a vastly inferior goal difference to Toulouse, who face Guingamp on the final day of the season. They need to pretty much still win to even avoid an automatic relegation if Troyes pick up something against Monaco, because they're only a point ahead of them after Troyes managed to pick up that point against Montpellier, which could prove to be vital. What do you think the end up makeup between those 3 sides will be?
It's pretty tough to say. I mean, you would say Caen should be in trouble because they're playing PSG, but PSG have looked so disinterested the last 3 weeks or so that you wouldn't bet against Caen getting something, especially at home. Toulouse at home to Guingamp, as we said earlier in the context of the Marseille match, Guingamp are not an easy team to play, but as Toulouse showed a couple of years ago, with their necks on the line at home, they are quite a prospect. So I'm sort of struggling to say what I think is going to happen. I mean, part of me kind of thinks Toulouse are going to get out of it and maybe drag Caen into it. And no offense to either team, but frankly, I think they both of them would sort of deserve relegation. I think they've both been, although neither are huge teams, I do think they've both underperformed considering some of the players and the decent manager that they've had the last couple of years. And they've both had very lucky escapes the last 2 years. Can't feel, again, like they're doing last year, sort of just hanging on based on points amassed earlier in the season. Just for the sort of intrigue and excitement of the last weekend, I'll say that Toulouse will somehow escape and bring Caen back into it. But I don't feel entirely confident when I say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And whoever they have to face from Ligue as well, there's going to be there's a new setup, at least in France, for Ligue 2. They have that sort of Scottish playoff where down to fifth play fourth, the winner of that plays third, the winner of that plays the Liga side. So Brest will play Le Havre in the initial quarter-final, as they like to call it, although quarters to whom. The semi-final would have the winner face Ajaccio, the regular AC, Ajaccio, not Gazalec, who are much further down the table this season. And then the winner will face whoever finishes third third from bottom at least in Liga. On to the off-the-field news as well before our awards that we'll go through as well, which is certainly looking forward to, is the official news, at least, that Thomas Tuchel will be Paris Saint-Germain manager next season. Nasser Al-Khelaifi had hinted to it after the game on Saturday evening, Adam, that they were going to announce someone pretty soon, and it's all but confirmed on Ligue 1's website earlier today, and Tuchel will be taking over on a 4-year deal. Is this a good move for both the club and the man?
Wow, that perhaps it's a very difficult question to answer at the moment. Is it a good move for Tuchel? Possibly. I think yes. It's a step up from Borussia Dortmund. Although obviously Dortmund are a huge club too, but his time there didn't really end in the most sort of harmonious way. And although being a very sought after manager, his reputation was a little bit damaged by the way things ended there. So for him, I think it is a huge opportunity and one that he would be foolish not to take, despite the fact that he is highly sought after. For PSG, I think perhaps yes, I would say it is a good appointment for them as well, given that they're a club that they do. They just prioritise sort of celebrity status and big names. And I don't know that Thomas Tuchel necessarily, one, would buy into that, and two, is a celebrity big name like Carlo Ancelotti, or a lot of the other managers that are sort of thrown about in terms of who might take over. Mourinho, maybe even Pochettino, those sort of types. And I think Thomas Tuchel is someone that represents the ability and the want, if you like, to develop the project at PSG, to develop the squad, to think in a more longer term perspective and bring players through and think a lot more about how he might get the best out of the team and how he might evolve the team. And the only thing is whether PSG also buy into that. And he's been given a 2-year contract, which is pretty standard, I suppose. But it would be nice to see them give him, say, 4 years and say, by the end of those 4 years, we want to be challenging genuinely for honours on all fronts consistently, rather than if they have it feels like that 2-year contract says if you have a bad year and we don't necessarily improve, then he's going to be under threat. And it's that kind of short-term thinking that PSG have struggled with since QSI took over, and it's arguably the main barrier to their success. In terms of the transfer market, Tuchel might be the right man there, because some of his players, like Julian Weigl, some of those players that might come in aren't the Neymar, Mbappe, stratosphere transfers that perhaps the club one can't really keep sustaining for FFP reasons alone, and he may suit them in that regard. So there are caveats to that too, but I think it's a good move in principle, but PSG would have to change their philosophy for it to work out.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, isn't it, Jez? Because like Adam mentioned, he had a bit of a falling out with the hierarchy at his previous club, and this is a hierarchy that wouldn't really take very kindly to that in any means or shape or form. But at the same time, I think we could also argue that Unai Emery came in with Europa League victories under his belt, excellent seasons at Sevilla as well. Thomas Tuchel, other than obviously the few seasons he had at Borussia Dortmund, he improved them, but there's only really DFB Pokal sort of to his name as well. It's seen as maybe a step up from Emery, but at the same time, silverware-wise, he's not as accomplished as the Spaniard that is leaving. So is this a little bit of a risk still from PSG?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's sort of now we're looking back and saying, everyone's kind of saying, yeah, Emery wasn't such a great appointment, not such a great manager, but there was a reasonable amount of excitement at the time because he, the big thing for PSG was to take the next step in terms of Europe, and he's won 3 Europa Leagues, so it did feel like he was kind of the right man for the job. Now, sort of trying to do the opposite and convince ourselves that Tuchel's a great coach, and I do think he's potentially a great coach, but yeah, certainly his records and he's not that long-standing a coach doesn't necessarily point to the fact that he's absolutely top quality. And I do wonder if, as Adam alluded to, the way that PSG is run and non-football people butting in, players maybe having too much influence. Today a story came out that Simeone said that he was approached last year. Mourinho, there's always been sort of rumours. I do wonder if maybe the very top coaches have decided that they're on a bit of a hiding to nothing at PSG, and so Tuchel is kind of not the best of the rest, but sort of just below the very top tier of coach. And so I think there is a risk in that sense, but it just depends how you look at it. In another way, it's perfect for both parties because it means that he does have everything to prove. So he's gonna really be working hard to sort of cement or improve his reputation. And PSG, as Adam said, it just depends if they can change their philosophy. There's some who would say that the fact that El Khalifi and Enrique were overruled for this appointment, and it was the Emir that picked Tuchel, is a good thing because it means that clearly El Khalifi is going to have less influence. Or you could look at it the other way, which I'm inclined to do, and say that suggests that there's absolutely no intention to change anything. If someone as far removed from actual football as the Emir is making the calls. So for Tuchel, I do think, on the one hand, it's a perfect opportunity to really show I am one of the best around. But on the other hand, it's a big risk because if he's not allowed as much influence as he surely wants, and whether he sort of sticks around or walks again, I think either way, probably through no fault of his own, it would probably mean that he'd leave with his reputation tarnished. So I think it's a very high risk game for him. For PSG, I wouldn't say it's high risk because they're just going to sort of be carrying on the way they've been doing the last 2 or 3 years. And there's so many people who are rooting for them not to be successful, which I still maintain is completely hypocritical considering that everyone sort of loves City, who've basically done everything in exactly the same way and actually taken longer to do it. So in that sense, I don't think PSG have got anything to lose, but it is about time that that they started, I guess, growing up and making that next step. It is time for them to do it. They've got all the sort of resources for them to do it, and it is just certain individuals and certain sort of philosophies within the club that are holding them back. So maybe Tuchel will be the person to help them change their ways. If he's not, then I think it could end quite nastily and even quite quickly.
Yeah, and it'd be an interesting one to keep an eye on, at least anyway, next season. The narratives that we'll see at the Parc des Princes will go on and on and on, it seems. Time for the Get French Football News Awards for 2018, and we've got plenty on offer, as well as the team of the year as well, players in all positions, young player, breakout star, manager, top signing, flop signing, best French player playing abroad, and obviously the Ligue 1 overall best player of the season. So let's try and get through this, gents, as we can. Let's start with Ligue 1 goalkeeper of the year, and the nominees are Steve Mandanda of Marseille, Benjamin Lecomte of Montpellier, Stéphane Ruffier of Saint-Etienne, and Alphonse Areola at PSG. 4 good goalkeepers, Adam, and 4 good goalkeepers that have had good seasons as well, especially someone like Areola, who was sort of maligned previously. Mandanda had that spell at Crystal Palace, obviously, before returning and has shown his stuff. Lecomte, we've always seen at Lorient as sort of a baseline average goalkeeper, but has really excelled this season at Montpellier. And Ruffier, always a little bit classy. It's been a bit more difficult of a year to pick a goalkeeper, really, but 4 good contenders. Is there anyone that you think stands out heads and shoulders above the rest?
For me, I think Stefan Ruffier would be my pick. I like Lecomte. I thought he was good at Lorient, and Montpellier have been very centrally sound this season, so he deserves his shout in there as well. Mandanda is undeniably an extremely talented goalkeeper, and he's one of those goalkeepers that can have those games where he is just unbeatable and he pulls off unbelievable saves left, right, and centre. And he's had a few of those this season, but maybe not his best season overall. Areola's been much better in the last, maybe 2 months. He's been good, to be fair to him. I'm not sure the rest of his season, necessarily lends himself to being in contention, but he has improved a lot this season and isn't the liability that Kevin Trapp is. So for me, Stefan Ruffier in the first half of the season when Saint-Etienne were really very poor, he saved them on so many occasions. And much like Mandanda, is one of those goalkeepers that can just have those games where he is omnipotent and you just cannot get past him. The win at Dijon, I think earlier in the season, the 1-0, is a fine example. And for me, he's an underrated goalkeeper, not just in Ligue 1 terms, but in European terms. And I'm very surprised that perhaps because he's not the best technically, but I'm very surprised that perhaps a bigger club hasn't come in for him, because he's a very safe pair of hands. So for me, I think Ruffier's had another brilliant season, and to be honest, I think I would have picked him last year as well. So yeah, I think Ruffier would be my pick. He's a superb goalkeeper.
Yeah, he absolutely is. Jez, is there anyone that's missing from that list? Like I mentioned, it's not really been necessarily the most outstanding year for goalkeepers to really stand head and shoulders above everyone else. But is there anyone that's maybe a little bit disappointed to miss out?
I can mention a couple. I think Tatrasanu's had an excellent season at Nantes. Sort of as ever, they've been sort of built around a strong defence, and I think he's been. I mean, I think it was a great coup that they signed him anyway. He was doing great things at Fiorentina, but I think he just carried on where he left off and has looked excellent this season. I think, speaking for Rich, who's not here this week, I think Kubek's been really good for Rennes. I think the first couple of matches when I can't remember who was in. Was it Diallo? I can't remember. Before he came in, it looked like that was going to be a real problem position. But I think he's looked, well, as you said, really safe pair of hands behind the Rennes defence, and a big part in their qualifying for Europe. So, I mean, they're the two that missed out that I would sort of immediately say that can feel a bit hard done by to not even be on the list of nominees.
Yeah, especially Kubek. I think you make a great point there, Jez. He's been excellent since joining, and trust the tradition of Czech goalkeepers at Rennes. Following in the steps of Petr Cech is not the worst thing in the world. But our winner for Ligue 1 Goalkeeper of the Year, and just as a reminder, 50% of these votes are from the GFFL audience and 50 voted by our jury, both at headquarters, and some of our very accomplished guests this evening. And we've combined that to choose our eventual winner. And the winner is Benjamin Lecomte of Montpellier. An excellent season for the 27-year-old. He's sort of been maligned a couple of times, really. Lorient, he had those couple of mistakes. He used to have those excellent games. I remember last season against Lyon, he was particularly superb, but playing in front of a strong defence that's had a terrific season, really. One of the best defences across Europe, never mind in France. He's been a key part of being an extra block at the end of that. On to right-back. Liga right back of the year, and the 4 nominees are Mathieu Debuchy of Saint-Etienne, Ruben Aguilar of Montpellier, Hiroki Sakai of Marseille, and Leo Dubois of Nantes. And Jez, I'll throw this one first at yourself. Who out of those 4 you feel that has been the best? Because it's a bit of a strange category. Again, this one, Leo Dubois is obviously off to Lyon in the summer and maybe faded in the last half of the season. Hiroki Sakai has been an ever-present for Marseille as that attacking influence he's been. Ruben Aguilar has been superb, and that's the reason why Nordi Mukiele has become a superb centre-back as well. So he's sort of done a double job of being both a good player and helping someone else. And Mathieu Debuchy, probably one of the surprises of the season after coming in January, has been a real influence on a Saint-Etienne side that have flown back up the table. But 4 good players. Who do you pick?
Yeah, I think they're all very solid choices, and I feel slightly guilty picking someone who hasn't even been there the whole season. But I just think Debuchy has kind of really captured the imagination in the second half of the season and been a huge influence in Saint-Etienne's sort of total transformation of form. Sort of providing the experience, providing solidity in defence, and also seemingly providing lots of goals as well. And not that it should be judged on that, but even the last second own goal against PSG, it was one of the sort of major events or talking points of this season or the second half of the season, and he was kind of at the center of that as well. So I think as a sort of the whole package, the kind of the play, what he's done for the club, what he's done for himself in terms of France contention, and just as a kind of good story, kind of on and off the pitch for Ligue 1, I think he's my right back of the season. But it was probably one of the harder choices to make of all the categories.
There's a couple that maybe can question they've missed out. Adam, you look at maybe someone we had in the half-season awards in Kene Tete at Strasbourg, maybe even Valentin Rosier at Dijon, who's had an excellent season as well. Is there any other names that sort of pop into your mind that are disappointed not to make the shortlist?
Yeah, one or two. I think it's definitely a very solid list, and so Saka and Dubois, deserve some credit. Dubois has obviously got his move to Lyon, which is he's long captain as well, and he's had a good season. But in terms of those sort of those that haven't made our top four, I think despite the ongoing disaster or continuing perhaps ongoing disaster at Lille, Kevin Malcuit deserves a shout. He's very influential going forward and has developed a lot over the last 2 seasons, and arguably Lille's senior player given how young their squad is. I think you look even at Kevin Amion at Toulouse, another side that are pretty poor, but he, again has been solid this season. And one that often goes under the radar is Youssouf Sabaly. I mean, we do talk about him as being a good player and a solid option, but he consistently performs his role very, very well. And although he's not necessarily the most spectacular of players and often finds himself in, he's at Evian, wasn't he, on loan, and then Nantes and now Bordeaux permanently. He's not necessarily a standout, but he's a very solid both defensively and going forward. So I think perhaps given Bordeaux's brilliant second half to the season under Poyet, he deserves some credit too. But I'm with Jez. Debuchy is difficult to ignore.
Right, it's very nice that you both mentioned him because our Liga right back of the season is absolutely Mathieu Debuchy, the half-season sensation, really. Even though he scored that own goal against Paris Saint-Germain, he gave away the penalty against Monaco at the weekend as well. There's been little bits of moments, but he's been terrific. He's laid on a couple of assists. He's scored some good goals. He's really assisted Lever as they've risen back up the table and still within a shout of Europa League football. And him himself, he might even sneak into the France squad given the depth of talent at right back at the moment and experience at right back at the moment for the French national squad. Maybe he gets that call and is on the plane to Russia. We'll wait and see on that one. That would be an interesting story if he can manage to pull that off. Liga centre-back of the year. We have Hilton at Montpellier, Marquinhos of Paris Saint-Germain, Adil Rami of Marseille, and Diego Carlos of Nantes. 4 very solid defensive sides, or at least 3. Maybe Marseille have not been great defensively at all times, really, this season. Adam, there's a number of good names, experienced names in that list as well. Very quickly, who do you think will take it away?
It's another tough one. I think looking at those 4 players, Carlos has had a good season, but again, Nantes have trailed off towards the end of the year and perhaps hasn't been as solid for much of the second half of the campaign. Rami's been good, but not spectacular, and has formed a part of a very impressive spine at Marseille that has gotten to the Europa League final. So he definitely deserves credit, and I would consider him. I think Marquinhos is very lucky to be on there as well. I know that PSG 92 points at the moment, probably 95 if they win the final game of the season. The league champions, treble winners. I think he's been pretty, by his standards, pretty poor this year. Although I can understand he's still their best centre back probably. Him or Kimpembe is pretty close. But for me, I think Hilton. I think of the four, Hilton deserves a lot of credit for Montpellier side, who have been built, as is typical for Michel de Zakarian, on defensive solidity. He into his 40s. He's been absolutely brilliant this season, and is a real leader and a real example for as such a sort of established and professional, if you like. He's a very, very professional player, and my vote would go to him. I think he's been brilliant again.
Jez, anyone spring to mind that's missed out here? That centre backs, it's not defending hasn't been the greatest forte of many teams this season, but there's still some excellent centre backs in Ligue that maybe feel a little bit disappointed that the likes of maybe a Marquinhos, who hasn't had the greatest season, was nominated.
I said the right back was difficult. I think this was the one that I found the most difficult, just because no one particularly excited me. No one really stood out. I mean, I went for Hilton as well, but in terms of other names, again, there weren't really any obvious other people. That Glick, I think, again has been solid, but like Marquinhos, hasn't been as good as last season. From a slightly biased point of view, Niakate has been one of the very, very few bright spots for Metz this year, and there's no way he's still going to be with us next season. I'm sure he'll stay in Ligue, if not going abroad. There aren't any really obvious standouts. Staying with PSG, Kimpembe has done okay, but possibly not taken the step forward that we all hoped he would. No one really, to me, has kind of, I don't know, made such a big play to really be the number one centre back this year. There's no obvious candidate for me.
I'll give a little nudge to Nordin Mukiele. He'll be mentioned a little bit later because he's now a Young Player of the Year nominees, but I think he's been a really excellent centre back. But it is that, someone who's teaching the young pups really how it's done. Our Liga centre back of the year is the 40-year-old Hilton. I don't think he'll mind us mentioning that too often, because it's a spectacular feat, and why he's not been called up to the Brazil squad when they might need someone to stop them, anyone scoring 7 past them in a World Cup again. Maybe Hilton might be your man. Liga left back of the year, and this one's a pretty strong category really, of Jordan Amavi, Marseille, Jérôme Roussillon of Montpellier, Ferland Mendy of Lyon, and Yuri Bashish of PSG. Jez, 4 fantastic left backs really that have all had good solid seasons. It's a tough one, this one.
It is. 4 very good players. Bashish has sort of benefited from Kazawa just sort of really slipping off the face of the earth, but I think he's done a good job and actually been a little bit underrated, and occasionally a little bit overly criticised for things that have gone wrong at PSG. Amavi, at one point I thought he might have been a shoo-in for this. I think he's gone off a little bit, but you almost think if Marseille qualified for Champions League through the league, he almost deserves it just for that goal line clearance the other day. Mendy, I think, is fantastic, and probably France's future left back. But I just feel like he gives away a few too many penalties for comfort. So I think he's just shown a little bit of inexperience at times, and so purely because of that, and because I think Montpellier's defence deserved to be sort of acknowledged this year, I've gone for Roussillon just ahead of Mendy.
Very quickly before I reveal the result on this one, Adam, who did you pick?
I think I went with Roussillon. Brilliant again this year. Very, very good going forward. Huge to the way that Montpellier played. Both him and Aguiar fullback are superb, and is a real standout player. So I think I went with Roussillon.
There's a reason we've got 2 excellent panelists this evening, because our Liga left back of the year is Jérôme Roussillon of Montpellier. He's had a terrific season, hasn't he? He's a marauding left back. He's really the creative centre of this team, even though he's playing out there at the full-back position. He's been tremendous when he's played. There was a spot in the season, obviously, where he's injured, and they did miss him. But in the counter-attacking style they want to play with, and Benza in front of him, and Dolly as well starting to grow in influence in terms of being able to attack at speed. He's been excellent this season. I honestly think out of everyone at Montpellier, he's the one that someone's going to pick up, because he's really a tremendous left back that's at the peak of his powers at the moment. On to Ligue 1 centre midfielder of the season. We have Luis Gustavo from Marseille, Adrien Rabiot of Paris Saint-Germain, Benjamin Bourigeaud of Rennes, and Luka Toussaint of Lyon. But 4 good centre midfielders, some really impressive performances from a few of them really this season. Adam, but who have you gone for?
I think there's only, you're absolutely right, there have been some really good performances, but there's only one option for me, and that's Luis Gustavo. He's been unbelievable for Marseille. It's really difficult to understate how good he's been, and I think he's crucial to the mentality of Rudy Garcia's team. He's crucial to their mental strength, and he really does cover a lot of ground. He leads by example. He's sort of a lightning rod for all the pressure that club kind of experience. And he's almost without fail utterly brilliant as well. Brilliant on the ball, wins the ball back, dictates play from deep. I think he's been unbelievable this season, and I think he's got the opportunity to become a genuine Marseille legend. If they go and win this Europa League final, and he's brilliant again, and leads them into the Champions League, and who knows, they may have gone a decent run there too. I genuinely think he could, if he stays there for a few seasons, could be a genuine Marseille great. So it has to be Luis Gustavo for me.
Maybe interesting on this list that someone like Ndombele hasn't made it, although again he's someone who will be mentioned later. It's nice to see Benjamin Bourigeaud mentioned in this category, really. But Jez, who did you pick?
I went for Gustavo as well, for basically all the same reasons. I think Toussaint has been quietly excellent for Lyon. Bourigeaud, I think, has been not quite a revelation, because he's been doing great stuff for Lens for a while now, but to make that step up so well and get into double figures for goal scoring from central midfield is excellent. Rabiot, I think, has gone off the boil sort of since the Real Madrid matches, so I think he's possibly lucky to even have been nominated. But yeah, even despite how good those other three are, I think Gustavo by a mile, for all the reasons Adam said, and which I won't expand on because I might do later instead.
Yeah, because it's 4 for 4 for our dynamic duo, because Ligue 1 centre midfielder of the year is Marseille's Luis Gustavo. He's been tremendous since he's joined from Wolfsburg. I'm excited to be out of there, to be fair, and back into a team fighting for European spots. He's been a real revelation, really. If he can keep this up, there's no wonder he's in the Brazil squad as well. He's been dynamic both as a defensive force and even occasionally striking from distance as well. He's been a tremendous season for Marseille. On to Liga attacking midfielder of the year, and this is probably one of the more competitive categories as well. There's a few that have missed out, and maybe disappointingly so for some of them, but in here is Florian Thauvin of Marseille, Nabil Fekir of Lyon, Ronnie Lopez at Monaco, and Neymar of Paris Saint-Germain. A strong group, really. You can't really argue with many of those names being in there. Jez, but who did you pick?
Trying to remember. I went with Thauvin. Again, really strong category. But I think Fekir early in the season looked like he was going to be player of the year, but partly because of injuries, occasional sort of drops in form, I don't think he's sort of absolutely kept it at the top of his game for the whole season. Lopez has had an amazing 2018, but was a bit quieter early on. I think he deserves a lot of credit for taking over where Bernardo Silva left off, and not quite reaching those standards, but not making Silva as missed as he could and should have been. And Neymar, I think, in a way, he's sort of a victim of his own success. I just think he's such an amazing player that even when you look at his brilliant stats for this season, I just feel, it sounds ridiculous to say, but in some sense, I do feel he's been disappointing. Probably as much for his attitude. Some PSG fans say it's unfair. It's all, the media that have built it up. But I do think his attitude has been wrong at times, even if it's been misguided with, the poker and all that kind of thing. That, starting earlier in the season with the whole penalty thing with Cavani, I don't think he's been as good as he could be both in terms of football and kind of attitude. Whereas Thauvin, who's never been my favourite player, again, either in terms of football or attitude, you can't really fault what he's done for Marseille this year. The only question mark with him, again, is not turning up in those really big matches. But he's done so much for them in all of the other matches. So what is that? Just take off the 6 against the big teams. So still like 31, 32 matches. And again, the stats that he's come up with have just been fantastic. And so I think it's hard to argue against him, even though all of Ligue 1's players seem to have done.
Adam, who would you pick?
I went Thauvin as well. I think he's been unbelievable this season, but it is caveated by the fact that he has been a little bit quiet in bigger games. But I think it's difficult to look past him. And the performance to get them back into the game at the end against Guingamp on Friday, kind of typifies what he's about, and has become a real talisman for Marseille. So Florent Thauvin for me.
Yeah, this was a really tough category, really. Fekir was running away with this probably earlier in the season, but faded with injury and a little bit of a dip in form. Ronnie Lopez has come on a late surge, but maybe Monaco's dip in form at the end of the season has made people forgetting how good he has been for them this season. Has probably been their best player, really. And obviously Neymar's injury as well has derailed some of his possible chances at this, which is why the Liga attacking midfielder of the year is Marseille's Florian Thauvin. He's had a tremendous season and he's up for the big award at the end as well. So maybe it's not the end of the night for Thauvin or for Gustavo, who's also up for that award as well. Liga forward of the year contains Edinson Cavani, our top scorer for Paris Saint-Germain. Kylian Mbappe, also of Paris Saint-Germain. Mariano Diaz of Lyon, and Carl Toko Ekambi of Angers. Adam, what was your choice in this one?
It was another tough one. I went Cavani though. I think just because the numbers of goals are kind of difficult to argue compared to the others. I think Mbappe's been very good, very exciting at times, but not necessarily as prolific as people would have hoped. Diaz, I really like Diaz, but he can be very selfish, and he's got a little way to develop before he comes to play. That he can really be a very, very good player and could lead that Lyon side for many years to come. And Akambi's been great as well, but I don't think he's in the same class as the other three. So I went Cavani. He used to be my least favorite player at Paris Saint-Germain anyway, because given my job at Football Radar, I watch a lot of PSG and every single game for the last 4 years, and he frustrated me a lot. But this season I've really come to love him. I think he's a gentleman. I think he's a consummate professional. When he's on form, he's a brilliant finisher, and he's a very exciting finisher as well. There's something of a sort of a ninja about him. He does everything very quickly and very fast. Those glancing front post headers are superb, and I've really grown to love him this year. And he's now arguably my favourite player in the league. So I think, given his goals compared to everybody else, I think it has to be Cavani.
Jez, who was your choice?
Cavani, I agree with everything that Adam said, except that I'm still not absolutely convinced about him at the very, very top level. But for Liga, he's obviously helped by what he has playing behind him. He's in a different class to the others, and you can't argue against him.
Yeah, which is exactly why he's also voted in as our Liga forward of the year. I do want a quick mention for Carl Toko Ekambi, who has had a terrific season. To be mentioned even among those kind of names is a real result for him, and I'm sure someone's going to come in the summer and really enjoy how good of a player he can really be. But Edinson Cavani proving doubters wrong yet again, trying in the face of adversity, which for a lot of parts of the season was Neymar for one reason or the other, but becoming our top scorer and showing again just how good of a footballer he is. Historically, the most scorer in Paris Saint-Germain history as well. On to Liga Young Player of the Year, and some terrific nominees in this, and my favourite category at least, in Tanguy Ndombele of Lyon, Kylian Mbappe of Paris Saint-Germain, Nordi Mukiele of Montpellier, and Presnel Kimpembe, also of Paris Saint-Germain. A hotly contested category as always, but maybe not as one-sided as it has been in other years, at least anyway in the last couple of years. Jez, who did you pick?
I went for Ndombele. I think Kimpembe's been very good. Mukiele's been excellent. Mbappe, a bit like what I said about Neymar. I feel he's almost sort of created a monster. Everything that he did last year was so spectacular that if any other 19-year-old had his stats from this year, it would be unbelievable. But it's so unfair to say, but at times this year it has felt a little bit like he's been underperforming or a bit disappointing, which is crazily harsh. But he should be flattered that we're judging him by such high standards. But Ndombele, I just think, more or less unknown at the start of the year, outplayed PSG for Angers, came to Lyon, outplayed PSG twice for Lyon, and has just been just a fantastic force for them. I think he at times he makes N'Golo Kante look like a lazy player. He can do it all, and I really think that the world's his oyster if he keeps his head on his shoulders. I think he could be one of the world's great midfielders of the next few years. I really think he's that talented. Defensively, fantastic long shot on him as well. I think he's brilliant.
Yeah, Adam, who did you choose?
Yeah, I went Ndombele. Difficult to argue with Jez there. I think I 100% agree with his talent. He's such a dynamic player and so powerful and just unplayable at times. He's that you mentioned that long range shot as well. There was that shot against PSG away from home that hit the bar when he played very well in that game. And yeah, I think even though this is a strong category, I think it has to be Ndombele.
And our Ligue Young Player of the Year is Lyon's Tanguy Ndombele. He's obviously not officially with them yet because he's only on loan, but he's been tremendous. I agree with both of you. He's comfortably, I think, the winner of this award in the end. He's been tremendous. I really love the way he tends to win the ball, turn, drive at teams. He really turns defence into attack in such an exciting one movement, and he can be really, when he's motoring and when he's really on form, he can be almost impossible to stop, which is why Paris Saint-Germain are even having a look at him, really, because he's a true tremendous midfielder and one to certainly keep an eye on for the future. On to two awards. I'm going to combine these ones to try and save a little bit of time, at least anyway. It's our top signing of the year and our flop signing of the year, sort of the joke awards really of these ones. So we've got Neymar for Paris Saint-Germain on the top signings as a way to don't get too confused. Nolan Roux of Metz, Mathieu Debuchy of Saint-Etienne, and Luis Gustavo of Marseille for those top signings. Jez, who did you pick in this one?
I was a bit biased. I think I went for Nolan Roux just because, again, Neymar, to me, not particularly a great signing because I think PSG would have won the league without him. He was signed to do things in the Champions League. I don't think he did, and I think probably he actually hamstrung PSG in a way. Gustavo, if I wasn't being biased, I would have said Gustavo, but I already had him for a couple of other categories, so I thought I'd give someone else a chance. And Nolan Roux, as horrific as Metz have been, I was one of the ones who, laughed when we signed him and thought, well, we're nailed on for relegation now. We were nailed on for relegation, but it was absolutely not because of Roux. We would have gone a hell of a lot earlier if it wasn't for his fantastic goal-scoring form and also just brilliant attitude, especially considering he's a bit of a laughing stock around Ligue. He really has been a breath of fresh air for Metz, and he deserved better than what most of the rest of the team around him gave him. And to come up with, I can't remember how many, I think 15, 16 goals for such a badly performing team is quite spectacular, I think.
Adam, what did you pick?
I'm not 100% whether I went with Roux, but it was him or Gustavo again. But I think I did go with Nolan Roux. I mean, if I could pick him for striker of the year, I think I would as well. I just want to sort of read his goal record off here. Like it's such a turnaround in terms of his form. Look at the clubs he's played for. Okay, promoted with Brest and got 15 goals, 2 seasons in Ligue and 6 and 4, and then 4 seasons at Lille, 5, 8, 9 and 9. 9 at Saint-Etienne and 4 at Saint-Etienne. To get 15 for the side that finished bottom of the league is unbelievable. And he's been uncharacteristically clinical in front of goal. He's been a real focal point for their attack. And every time he scored, it was such a big sort of lift. I really sort of got behind him. I just felt like, again, like Jez said, when they signed him to replace Sheikh Diabate, I just felt like, how do they plan to stay up like this? But it's as he said, it's been in spite. Relegation hasn't been because of Rue. It's been in spite of him. So I think he's been superb, and it's the best season of his career by some distance. So Nolan Rue for me.
Yeah, I think thank God they didn't settle on Emmanuel Riviere. But our Ligue 1 top signing of the year is Neymar of Paris Saint-Germain. Has been tremendous. I think we seem to forget a little bit because it's been so long that he's been out, and we'll probably be reminded when the World Cup turns around. And I know his antics off the field have left a sour note and bits like that. But at the same time, we remember back to the summer how much of a shift and a transformation his signing to French football was, both for the league, for Paris Saint-Germain, for everyone across Europe to see the real influx that it's changed the entire transfer market, really, that one signing. That's why, even though it's our top signing from both our fans and our voters, it was more than just a top signing for PSG. It was a top signing for Ligue 1, for French football, and really changed the face of transfers for the foreseeable future, it seems, unless the bubble bursts. Ligue 1 flop of the season. There's a few interesting names that we've barely seen this season really in here. We've got Wesley Sneijder of Nice, who's now left Nice, obviously. Ayman Abdennour of Marseille. Paul-Joseph Ntep of Saint-Etienne, and Thiago Maia of Lille. There was a lot expected of him. But who did you choose, Adam?
I think 3 of the 4 are circumstantial in terms of how they didn't turn out. One is because he's terrible. So I think Sneijder, unfortunate, doesn't really have anything to play anywhere for him to play in that Nice team. And Tep has been struggling with injury and, has been in and out of the side and has other long-term injuries before going back to France. And I don't think he's been that bad either. And Thiago Maia has just been in the middle of a complete mess at Lille. But Ayman Abdennour has been unbelievably poor this season. And he said recently it was sort of the worst period of his career, which isn't hard to believe, to be fair. And although he was brilliant at Monaco when, that season they got away to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, and I thought, given that, Rolando was solid-ish and Rami was a good signing, obviously, that he would really complement them. But he's been absolutely nowhere near the level required. His first game was an utter disaster. And it just feels like he is nowhere near the player that he was when he was at Monaco and that Marseille thought they were signing. In 4 last 6 games, he hasn't even made the bench. And, Kamara's been 18-year-old Boubacar Kamara's been starting ahead of him when given a chance. He's been really good, to be fair. But I noticed today that Abdel didn't even make the Tunisian provisional squad for the World Cup, which really shows, how there may be a caveat to that in that he's, not necessarily on the best terms with the manager. But even so, it shows that his form is really very poor. So I think there's only one here for me, and that's Ayman Abdennour, unfortunately.
Jez, who did you choose?
I think this is maybe the first one where we haven't come up with the same answer, although I certainly don't disagree with anything at all that Adam said. But I went with Sneijder just because, although he's sort of coming to the end of his career, he in his time was such a great player, and Nice in recent seasons have done so well to spot a sort of slightly left field signing, and who's kind of been on the wane for various reasons and managed to get the best out of them. So when Sneijder came in, I did think, is this going to, it was kind of reasonably exciting to think, is this going to be another one of those, great pieces of business by Nice, and is he going to come in and, provide that ammunition for Balotelli, or, form a brilliant partnership with Seri, that kind of thing. He turned up, not entirely fit, partly because of, it seemed that he was carrying quite a bit of extra weight, which he didn't seem to be able to get rid of. And as you said, he left not long after he arrived, having done practically nothing in between. So I think just because of the sort of level of disappointment from the excitement when he signed and how little he sort of backed up that excitement, I went for Sneijder.
What is it with Dutch playmakers and their weight sometimes? It seems to always go south quite quickly for them. The winner of our Ligue 1 flop of the signing of the season, unfortunately for them at least, is Wesley Sneijder, who's obviously no longer in French football. He's playing a sort of, I think it's in Qatar, I think he's playing in, or it might be Saudi Arabia, one of the two sort of backwaters of football, you might say at least anyway. But he did really nothing much of note, so we won't dwell on him too long at least anyway. On to best French player playing abroad, and there's 4 nominees for this, and they should all be really along the French national squad as well, and that's Samuel Umtiti of Barcelona, Antoine Griezmann of Atletico Madrid, Paul Pogba of Manchester United, and N'Golo Kante of Chelsea. 4 good names, 4 that are likely to be heavily involved in the summer. Jez, who did you choose?
I went for Umtiti. Pogba, I think, deserves to be there more than Benzema deserves to be on the official list, but I'm still not sure that his season as a whole warranted him being amongst the top 4. Kante, I think, has been excellent again, but possibly not quite the same standard as last year. And Griezmann could probably say more or less the same thing. I think he has had, certainly recently, a really good run of form, but possibly not quite hit his heights. Titi, still sort of growing, his reputation is still growing as a player, and I think he's been fantastic. And although defence has never been Barcelona's strongest point, to make himself a sort of indisputable starter, and the last couple of matches he hasn't played, and they conceded 5 this week. I'm not sure, I can't remember what happened last week, but I don't think Barcelona are the same team defensively without him. He had a couple of off matches when there were all the rumours about his contracts, but generally I think he's had a fantastic season. Made himself probably undroppable for France as well now, and just overall of those 4, I think he just about deserves the award.
How about you, Adam? Who did you choose?
I think it's difficult to disagree with what Jez said there, but I tipped slightly the other way and went Kante. Although perhaps not as I don't know if he's as influential, but perhaps as prominent as he was last year. I think he's still hugely important to Chelsea and still the best at what he does in world football, and his form in an individual basis has been not far off what it was last year. And having seen him come through at Caen, and then obviously the fantastic season with Leicester, and he's only improved really. And I think for me, getting the best out of him at the World Cup, perhaps not playing him as a holding midfielder, playing him with a bit more scope to use his mobility and to press and to play a bit more, could be the difference between France having a very good World Cup and them having a very bad World Cup. So I went with Kante, but Tuti's been superb as well, and for him to adopt that role at Barcelona from Lyon, having come from Lyon and develop as he has, is superb as well. But Kante just for me.
Well, you were both doing so well, but both of you are wrong on this one. The best French player voted by our fans and our jury is Antoine Griezmann of Atletico Madrid. He's had another great little season for Atletico. Maybe not as strong after shushing fans at one point and having the variety of hairstyles he seems to do, almost David Beckham-esque, one of his own heroes, he'll openly admit, but a very strong forward and possibly looking forward to a strong summer again after the Euros, and also maybe a big money move to pastures new, at least in the summer. But congratulations to Griezmann on that award. On to our final 3 awards, and 3 of my favourites, at least anyway, other than the Young Player of the Year, and that's starting with Ligue 1's breakout star of the year, and that's containing Houssam Aouar of Lyon, Malcolm of Bordeaux, Chang Hun Kwon of Dijon, and Memphis Depay of Lyon. Adam, in this one, who did you choose?
It was a hard one. I think I like to see it like that. Kwon is in there. He's been really good for Dijon this season. Very waspish little sort of presence, and has really driven that side forward. Some superb performances and superb goals as well. That goal at Amiens, that little 1-2, and the bending shot in top corner was one of my favourite goals of the season. Obviously Malcolm and Depay have had great seasons, but especially Depay in the last few months. But for me, it's Houssam Aouar, just because how graceful he is. He reminds me so much of Andres Iniesta, and perhaps even Mario Götze when he broke through. He's a bit of a different player now these days, but when Götze was a similar age at Dortmund, he just glides across the pitch. He's got such great vision. He's got such good technique. He's just wonderful to watch. And at 19, he could be, the sky is really the limit for him. And I had to go with Hossam Aouar.
Yeah, absolutely. It could even be taking the mantle off of Nabil Fekir should the captain leave this summer. Jez, who did you choose?
Yeah, I went for Aouar as well. I think, Kwan's a good call. I think Depay has been excellent in recent weeks, but I'm just not sure if I'd call him sort of breakout or breakthrough just because he's already a sort of established name on the world scene. I think Aouar has just been so exciting. He's one of those names that has been sort of mentioned in dispatches the last couple of years, but I didn't expect him to be so prominent and play so regularly this year. And as Adam said, I think I've described him before as like sort of galaxy chocolate or something. He's just beautiful to watch. He sort of glides across the pitch. He just looks so smooth and everything that's effortless. And he's a class act, I think.
Yeah, it's probably a good job we didn't put him in the Young Player of the Year category because that would have made a real tussle between him and Ndombele. And like you mentioned, Depay's been great in the second half of the season. Malcolm was great in the first half of the season. That probably discounts both of them. Chang Hung Kwan, I've really enjoyed him as well. I think the South Korean's been excellent. He's going to look forward to a World Cup where maybe he shines there as well with that attitude. Maybe South Korea can be a little bit of a dark horse with him and Heung-min Son as well in that team. But our Ligue 1 breakout star of the year, quite obviously by the other two choices, is by our other two panelists, sorry, is Hossam Aouar. He's been terrific. I think it was personified in the goal he scored against Strasbourg, actually, the little lovely 1-2 and the sort of glide into the bottom corner for him. The fact that he can play in midfield, he can play in the attacking midfield position where Fekir occupies if he needs to. He can play out wide if the Lyon need to. His flexibility is because he's such a good, graceful footballer, and he's got a lot of years to come to be an excellent steward. He's going to be the next in line really to take the mantle maybe next season for Lyon, especially if someone like Fekir does end up as rumoured possibly at somewhere like Liverpool. He's the one who might try and take the crown next season. On to our penultimate award, and that's Liga Manager of the Year, and there's 4 terrific candidates here. There's Christophe Pélissier of Amiens, Rudy Garcia of Marseille, Leonardo Jardim of Monaco, and Bruno Genesio of Lyon. Jez, who did you choose in this one?
I went for Pélissier. I think the other 3 have all done a very good job. I think Genesio sometimes gets a little bit too harsh press. I think he's managing a mix of experienced players, of young players, of big egos, and I don't think he's doing as bad a job as many say. I think Garcia has been fantastic, sort of moulding together a squad that's assuming we're talking about Rudy Garcia, that is, a squad that's sort of really tough to beat, and probably sort of greater than the sum of its parts. Similarly to Thauvin, possibly he falls down a little bit in terms of the results against the big teams, but then he's also brought the team to the Europa League final, so it's difficult to argue with what he's done. And Jardim, as we said, I think he's just simply the best manager in Liga, and I don't think, despite the fact that on paper they've still got a good squad, considering the sort of turnover from last year, I don't think Monaco have got any right really to be within the top 2 or 3. So I think he's done a really great job. But Pélissier, I just think Amiens were probably in everyone's eyes nailed on for relegation. They only got promoted in the 96th, 97th minute of last season, and it felt like a fantastic story, but that they would sort of come back to earth with a bump this year. But they've been fantastic, and relatively comfortably stayed up, and a lot of the time done it with playing decent football. I mentioned Schneider, sort of bargain signing. Kakuta arguably could come into that category as, really having done well for them and been a talisman for the team. But it certainly hasn't been a one-man show. I think all through the team, from Gertner in goal, Konate up front, I think they play well as a team. They play decent football, and I just think they've kind of been the revelation. Nothing to add really. I think he was, really harsh that he missed out on the sort of official UNFP nominations, and I hope he gets recognition here instead.
Adam, who did you choose?
Yeah, I agreed again. I think Pelissier deserves all the praise that he's getting and deserves to win that UNFP award. And the fact that Unai Emery got it is absurd, really, compared to the achievements of Christophe Pelissier. I know that PSG have obviously won the treble, but I don't know how much Unai Emery really had to do with that. One thing to add to everything Jez said, which I 100% agree with, but looking at the team that sort of almost started the year. In fact, it's still very much a team. But you look at sort of 5 of those players: Gutner, Adenon, Debassi, El Hajam, and Thomas Bonconduit. All were playing in Nacional 2 years ago, and they're players that have been promoted two years in a row and have formed, obviously Bonconduit in midfield, but formed one of Ligue third best defence this season, which is mind-boggling, really. So I think huge credit to Pelissier and huge credit to those players that have managed to keep them so defensively solid, and despite their sort of humble beginnings, if you like. So brilliant coaching and a fantastic story for them. And I think it's difficult to look past Pelissier for this one.
Yeah, it's a tough one, this one, but our Ligue manager of the year, as voted by the audience and our jury, is Rudy Garcia of Marseille, who's had a terrific job, really. He's made that team really stubborn and slowly grown them over the season. He's improved every single one of those players. It felt like a ragtag summer, but he's pulled them together into some kind of team, and not just that, a really good team at times as well. And obviously in a Europa League final that they hope on Wednesday will be really, really big stuff as well. But I'm pretty sure he would also give a nod to Christophe Pelissier because he's had a terrific season. I think people forget that the third best defence in Ligue is absolutely sensational. And if they win on Sunday, they could finish as high as, I think it's 12th. I think they can finish as high as, they're 12th now. So it could even be as high as 11th, which, if you'd have said that at the start of the season, I'm pretty sure they would have ripped your hand off from you quite simply because they've been terrific. But the award does go to Rudy Garcia, who has had a tremendous season. On to our final individual award, and it's the big one, which is our Liga Player of the Year. And our nominees are Edinson Cavani of Paris Saint-Germain, Neymar of Paris Saint-Germain, Thauvin of Marseille, and Luis Gustavo of Marseille. I'll start with you, Adam. Who did you choose?
I went Florent Thauvin. This was a tough one, obviously. As I mentioned about Cavani, I've really grown to appreciate him, and I think he's had a good season. And it's difficult to argue with Neymar's quality, although I agree with what Jess said about his attitude, and I 100% think that his attitude is a very poor one. There are a number of examples, that that sort of attest to that. But it's difficult to argue with his quality. I don't know how much effect he's had on the areas of the season that they would have wanted him to have. Not great against Real Madrid in the first leg. Okay, not disastrous, but didn't really affect the game as much as they would have liked, and perhaps not necessarily lived up to expectations. Really, I mean, 4 goals against Dijon is all very well, but I don't really see that as a reason to vote for him for the best player of the year. PSG players, as perhaps this podcast has shown, are measured by different standards to the rest of the league. And I don't think that Neymar has consistently lived up to those standards, unfortunately. Although, ability-wise, he is the best player in the league, without a shadow of a doubt. But in terms of the season, I think the most effect that Florent Thauvin has had on his team, the progression he's made, some of the performances he's put in, and how much of a talisman he's become to that Marseille side, it's difficult to ignore. I was close between him and Gustavo, for similar reasons, to be honest, but it's difficult to argue with with Thauvin's development since leaving Newcastle, and I think it has to be him.
Jez, who did you choose?
I agree with everything that Adam said, but of the two, I just went for Gustavo. I just maybe it's because I've never been such a big fan of Tova. I don't know, but I think that just tipping it in the tipping the scales in Gustavo's favour is that I think he's performed more or less every time he's played, whereas Thauvin has had those important matches where he's gone missing. And I feel that although Thauvin has been the one that has got the great stats in terms of goals and assists, I think Gustavo is sort of the one that kind of personifies that team, the sort of grinter, the never say die attitude. And I think he's the one that sets the tone for the team. I think he's I might be completely wrong if I sat and looked at the stats, but I just get the impression that when he's not there, he's missed more than Thauvin when he's not there. I feel like he's the one, he's the sort of general on the field that are pushing the team forward, if not only sort of with the ball, but also mentally as well. And I think he's the one that's really turned Marseille into the kind of winning machine that they've become this year.
Yeah, absolutely. But our Liga player of the year, it's a tough choice really between a lot of those players, but it is Florian Thauvin of Marseille, who's had a tremendous season. Congratulations to him. But we aren't quite finished yet. We have our team of the season that will be made up mostly of those players we mentioned earlier, but we'll also add a couple of extras in. So at the moment, we have our goalkeeper, right back, left back, one centre back, so we need another. And we also need another midfielder and another winger and another striker. I think I'll go for, so one sort of in every position. So I'm just looking for names now from both of you, and I'll start with you, Adam. So I want at least one for each of them. So I need a centre back, a centre midfielder, an attacking midfielder, and a striker.
To adding to the team, I think I'd go with Adel Rami. I think he's been solid this year and important to that Marseille spine. Central midfielder, I think Lucas Toussaint would complement Luis Gustavo pretty nicely. So I'd go with him alongside that. Him, I think Burgo's been good, but not quite as influential as Toussaint, and Rabiot's dropped off. In terms of sort of the attacking midfielders or wingers, I think it's close between Lopez and Fekir, but I think perhaps Fekir just edges it. I'm sort of thinking of just the what he's capable of is still quite astounding. That goal against Bordeaux at the start of the year, that shot from the genuine shot from 40, 50 yards that flew into the top corner, not a lob at all. It's that kind of thing that really sets him apart. So I think Fekir, and huge credit for him to come from what was a horrific knee injury as well. So I think Fekir for me, and then to join Cavani in attack. I think I'll go with Mariano Diaz. I think he's had a very productive season and has, despite some attitude issues perhaps, has shown he's got a tremendous amount of potential and can't argue with 16, 17 league goals. Despite not necessarily being, the focal point of the attack at all times, given Depay's form. So I think I'd have to go with Mariano Diaz there.
Yeah, absolutely. Very quickly, Adam, on that one, at least. Any changes when I say it doesn't have to be someone who was nominated?
Perhaps I might add in some of the younger players. I mean, Ndombele might get a shout in there as ahead of Toussaint possibly. I'd probably put Nolan Roux in there just because I really appreciate the season he's had. I think it's been fantastic as well, maybe. But I think that team is pretty solid and really shows off the quality that Ligue possesses.
Jez?
Centre back, I'm still sort of unimpressed with everyone really. I think there's lots of very good but not many standout players, so I'll just go Kimpembe, just to have a nice balance of young and old in there. Central midfield, yeah, if Ndombele isn't already in the team, I'd put him in. Winger, I'm tempted to be a bit biased again and go for Dossevi. I think to make the top three is everything that we said about Roux earlier, that Dossevi is in the top three of assists alongside Neymar and Payet, considering that's at bottom, is pretty unbelievable. But realistically, I think I agree with Adam between Fekir and Lopez, and I agree that I think Fekir just edges it. And then up front, it's tough, and there's a lot of very good players to complement Cavani. Yeah, go on. I'll go Diaz as well. I think that makes sense. That's pretty potent strike force. I think he's been really impressive for his first season in France.
Yeah, and I think we'll leave any sort of tiebreakers at least to the lead judge, which is luckily for me, myself. So our Ligue team of the season consists of Steve Mandanda, Matteo Debuchy at right back with Jerome Roussillon at left back. Hilton is joined at centre back by Adil Remy. Our centre midfielders are Luis Gustavo and Tanguy Ndombele, with attacking midfielders of Florian Thauvin and Nabil Fekir, with Edison Cavani and Mario Diaz up front. Well, that's all for our awards, and that's all we have time for this evening as well. My thanks to Mo, Adam, Jez, and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the preview show this time on Wednesday, straight after the Europa League final, so keep your eyes out for that one. And the main show will be back with the end of the season, really, but we do have another week on after that with our end of season review as well, so do keep your eyes open for that as well. But our show on Monday will be at the same place, same time next week. A bientôt. And goodbye.